Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Conquer the Gauntlet Pro and Strength and Speed owner, Evan Preparis. I have two other Conquer the Gauntlet Pros in the line. So back on the show, we have Lisa Nondorf.
Hey, guys.
And Doug Snyder again.
Hello, everyone.
So we wanted to cover a bunch of information, and I didn't want to, bring a guest on and end up having to talk over him half the time or her half the time. So we really wanted to recap some of the stuff from the last couple of weeks. Before we get to that, though, quick word from our sponsor. So this episode is brought to you by Stoke Shed. Stoke Shed is the newest sponsor of the Conquer the Gauntlet Pro team. If you're not familiar with them, they are a multimedia-based company that is based out of Tulsa. So they make videos for local brands, essentially. So music videos. They do videos for Conquer Fitness. They've done videos for Conquer the Gauntlet. They did a video for basically me at the last Conquer the Gauntlet race, which I was totally not expecting. They just kind of produced it and was like, oh, here, I have this video for you. And I was like, this thing's freaking awesome. So, yeah, if you've seen it, you may have seen it on my timeline. It's called Focus or Deep Work or something like that, talking about, concentration during races. So check them out. Doug and Lisa, what are your thoughts on Stoke Shed?
I ran into them at Oklahoma City Conquer the Gauntlet. Unexpectedly, I saw one of them carrying a nice camera, and they came by the pro team tent, and we just kind of struck up a conversation, and then it wasn't until after that I realized who they were and why they were there. So it was kind of neat to meet them, outside of the sponsorship circle, and it turned out that they had snapped a bunch of pictures of me at the Dallas Conquer the Gauntlet and did some really nice editing on them. And so I have a good little portfolio of pictures to use for some future promotions.
Yeah, they are awesome. So Stoke Shed is run by Bobby Ross and Victoria Ross, husband and wife. And definitely head over and check out their videos. I think the coolest part is I like to call it non-traditional OCR coverage. So it's not like a typical, here's a race, here's a bunch of their obstacles, here's a bunch of music. They kind of take things a little bit deeper and take it from a different angle. So I'm really excited to see what they come up with for us in the next year, and actually 2 years, because we're going to be working with them for the next 2 years. But yeah, go ahead and give Stoke Shed a like and check out some of their videos. All right, let's move on to the show. So let's move on to the show. So this episode, we're going to be covering kind of 3 or 4 different topics here. One, Lisa actually did our first race back, the Alpine Adventure Challenge. Doug also did a race this past weekend called Hero Dash. I was supposed to do Tough Mudder Long Island, and then on top of that, the week before, we had Toughest Mudder Central or Minneapolis, in addition to Conquer the Gauntlet, and Doug and Lisa were pit crew for Corinne and Andy Hardy. So we're going to get to all that this episode. We're going to start off, though, with Lisa. And we talked about her last time she was on the episode about her torn bicep. Now, you just raced this past weekend, so give us a rundown on how it went and kind of where you see things going in the future.
Okay. The PT that I've been doing for my rotator cuff has been, putting it stronger. So even though I'm back, I am still being extremely cautious. So the weekend that we were in Iowa, I was able to complete Pegatron. And so that made me pretty excited. I've been back to rock climbing, things like that. And so I decided to just jump into a race, and it was just a small local race, but it was a mandatory obstacle completion race. It did have monkey bars. It did have, walls, things like that. You're normal. And it was on a ski slope. So it still felt like a normal race. It just was kind of lower key. The monkey bars I call them baby monkey bars. They definitely weren't the long ones. But I just wanted to get my feet wet and remind myself what it felt like, because training is very different than racing. And just because you're in training mode doesn't always mean that you're capable of going out and running a race. And I wanted that feeling of, where am I at? And I figured that was a good get your feet wet, feel what it's going to be like to be back in a race. And was I capable of being back in a race?
I love that you're like, oh, I did Pegatron, even though I've been injured for several months. Like, most healthy people can't do that. So,
Pegatron with one bicep.
Yeah, Pegatron. I always make jokes. That's my new joke now is, I mean, I have one bicep and I have half the rotator cuff left. So, I mean, what else do you need?
Yeah.
Like,
So tell us a little bit about the Alpine Adventure Challenge. What are some of the obstacles? How long was it? Where was the race?
okay, it was a 5K. It was at Little Switzerland. So if anybody in the area has ever run terrain race, it's run on the same course in Little Switzerland. They actually made us go up and down the ski slope more times than they've done in the past with terrain race. Terrain race, they've let us run some of the trails. The Alpine Adventure, I just felt like we were just going up and down and up and down and up and down. So for me, there wasn't much ground for me to open up and run. I didn't taper for this event. I didn't do, because I knew it was just, hey, how is this going to feel? So I was pretty beat up from doing some sprints a couple days earlier. But the obstacles were, there was 8-foot wall. They had monkey bars. They called them lily pads. They just took the tubes, because it was a ski slope, they took the tubes you ride on and linked them all together, and you had to run across them. Or should I say, like, run, fall, and then slide across them, because it was rough. And then they did have, like, this big, huge slide. There was a lot of mud pits. And then they had this slack line. Like, it just, that was the worst thing I've ever been on. So, Doug, I think you told me you figured out what it was made of. I thought it was like tire, because it was super bouncy and rubber.
Right. It was an industrial belt, like a rubber flat belt that was about 4 or 6 inches wide, with holes drilled in it. It was for something in the ski slope operation, but yeah, go on with that.
Yeah, it puts slackline to shame. So I would say that the people that made it across on top, like running it, sprinted across it and would go flying. I'm a little more cautious because, again, I'm injured, so I have to be a little bit more careful. So what was holding this rubber belt up were 2 concrete blocks. So if you fell forward, you risked hitting a concrete block. So I decided the brilliant idea would be to crawl on my stomach, do army crawl over the top of it. So I did make it, but there were some sacrifices to my skin. But I did make it across. So to finish the race and be 100% obstacle completion, the only issue I had at all was the slack line. I did have to retry that a couple times. And then, like I said, I did have to crawl it. And I was a little more timid, just playing things safe than I probably needed to be. So, but it was a good, it felt good. It felt good to be back out on the race course. It felt good to be back out racing. It just felt good. So it made me leave and go, ooh, Savage is next weekend, maybe. But I also know I don't want to re-injure. I want to keep going the path I'm going. I do have some ideas about the next couple months, what my season might look like before I have surgery. So I want to plan for that as opposed to try something too big and put myself back on injury.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it went great, and I've used that crawl across on your stomach slack line at Conquer the Gauntlet before, which it is allowed because it just says cross by essentially by any means necessary. And I remember going to sleep that night, and so I had this open essentially abrasion on my stomach, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and my skin on my stomach is healing to my shirt, and I was like, oh, I go to take a piss, and I pull on my shirt, and I was like, ah, what the?
Yeah.
Ripping off the scab. It was less than pleasant, but
yeah, it was my inner thighs that took it. So I was wearing shorts afterwards, and they kept rubbing, and I was like, oh, that really, really hurts. I was like, oh. So my inner thighs, from squeezing the rubber so that it wouldn't just flip over, took kind of the burn. But then finding out that I was the only girl to actually do the obstacle after the race made everything a little bit better. Yeah. So in fact, they told me I was probably the only girl of the day that made that obstacle. There was very few people that actually made it across. There didn't have an attendant at that obstacle. So when most people figured out they weren't getting across, including some of the top males, they just decided to bypass, thinking nobody would make it. So they just ran around it.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. It's a small local race and it wasn't timed. And so it was just the first people to cross the finish line. That's where they pulled from. And it didn't, you didn't run with a band or anything. Like I said, it was a small race.
Yeah.
But my win was I made it across. I was able to swing on monkey bars as opposed to hand matching the whole way. So I said that my win was I got to go run a race, keep my band, and I learned I can do monkey bars now.
And it was in Wisconsin, right? You said?
Mm-hmm. It was in Wisconsin. It was in Milwaukee, in the Milwaukee area. So just north of Milwaukee.
And I guess officially you finished third?
Officially, I finished third.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. And let's back up a little bit more. So that's a great news story. Good to see you kind of, with one foot back in the water there, back in action. The week before was Conquer the Gauntlet and Toughest Mudder. So, Doug, give me a quick rundown of Conquer the Gauntlet, Iowa.
Okay. So this was my second year to do the race in Iowa, and the course was fairly familiar. It was a little cooler than I expected that morning, which was a big advantage. But then there was also light rain at the same time, so the normal grip obstacles all got way worse than I've ever experienced before. Like the Tarzan rig, things were slippery. I picked the lane that had the one nunchuck that didn't have a cap screwed on the bottom.
No, you can't go with that lane. That one sucks.
Yeah,
and there was a new hold on Tarzan too.
Oh, the steering wheel thing. Yeah. So it's like about a 12-inch steering wheel that's suspended in the middle, so it's flat, and when you grab one side of it, it just kind of flops down.
Yeah.
But that little drop can peel your hand off of it pretty easily, and with it being wet and shiny new paint, it was very smooth. I did have to do a retry on that because I went from the uncapped nunchuck to that steering wheel, and it was like 2 bad grabs in a row. But then
it might be on the live video.
Oh yeah, you were there for that.
It's on video.
Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So I started gaining a little bit of ground in the race right there because a lot of people had trouble with the Tarzan rig, and that was about maybe the 4th obstacle in there, I think. They split Lion's Den. They took the rolling drums out of the middle of it and moved them farther down in the race and dug a pit and just had them at ground level over a pit of water. So when I hit Lion's Den and shuffled my way up through the angled tube and then popped out on the other side, and it's like, well, there's nothing there. You just go down an angled ladder thing and you're done. That was a weird feeling because I was all excited for doing a big run across the drums. But I think the biggest notable thing in that race was getting to Smooth Criminal, which is the obstacle that has a couple of ninja steps that go into the giant ninja steps that have a horizontal pipe that you grab with your hands and transition back and forth a couple times. With those walls being slippery and feet were all muddy and wet, on top of that, I mean, that was carnage at that obstacle. Yeah. People were falling over and over and not getting it. Shins were all scraped up from coming off the ends of the walls. That was a big game changer for a lot of people that had been running a good pace up until that point. And I had to do a second try on that one as well.
Yeah, I heard that one just tore up the field with it
being
wet and slippery. And
yes.
I know some people were using like the split method, where essentially you like instead of bounding back and forth, you actually like lock off and like do like a backwards leg kick and then transition. Is that what you did, or did you bound across it?
I still bound across it, but I was a lot more deliberate in my launch to make sure my leg was pushing off kind of square to the angle of the wall as opposed to just winging it. because if I was angled, my foot would just slide out from under me. But I believe Brenna had posted a video of how she did it, and she did that kind of locked off thing where she got a foot on each side and like twisted her torso and then reached for the other side. So she always.
That's pretty much how Jordan did it as well.
Yeah.
Because I was watching as I was videoing, because I got to live through, and that obstacle was definitely determined the male's podium.
Yeah.
Jordan got through it, but he was very systematic and did it very much of like Brenna did on her video, where it was 1 foot turn, very slow and monotonous in every movement, just cautious. And the people that were running in second and third at that point, I don't know how experienced they were. And it was just wipeout after wipeout. And so it took Jordan a while to get through, but he got through, and then he built a pretty sizable lead at that moment because no one else was getting through.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about Jordan Buscemi, Spartan Pro, who races Conquer the Gauntlet. He used to race a lot more. I think he's down to like one a year now. So it's good to see him back and good to see him winning again. A great guy from the Wisconsin OCR crew.
Yeah, he's taking up mountain biking.
Oh, interesting.
He was actually I think he was at Little Switzerland doing a mountain bike race like 2 weeks before I raced there. So, yeah. So he's doing a lot more of biking. So.
And then also Nathan Palmer, was good to see him back on the podium too. So he ended up finishing second for Elite, and then kept on running for Continuum. So.
Yeah. Correct.
Yes, he had a good race.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it was the obstacles and watching Jordan go through, just very systematic and very cautious. Nathan was not systematic or cautious. He flew. he was just very much like, oh, okay. And it was funny to watch one style to the next, watching Jordan be very cautious and careful and, deliberate on movements. And then Nathan would come through and it just swung through monkey bars. I was like, oh, well, maybe they dried in the last 30 seconds. I don't know. All of a sudden, because you're like, ooh, I was like, ooh, he's being very careful, like chicken winging monkey bars, shaking out, like things like that. And I was like, they must be really slick. And then Nathan comes through. I'm like, well, maybe they're not. I don't know.
Nathan's been to like every Conquer the Gauntlet in the last 5 years. So I think he's got the obstacles down pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Plus all the kids races, he plays on the obstacles there too.
Right. Yeah. You want to get stronger? Go to Conquer Youth and do all their obstacles. I don't know.
Right, do like 20 laps.
Do 20 laps of a kid's course. You'll get stronger.
So Doug, how did your race end up finishing?
I ended up first in Masters, and I was 6th or 7th overall. So I was very pleased with that. My ratio timing against first place was pretty high on that race, so I knew I was definitely in my zone on that one.
Good stuff. Congratulations. And there was another Spartan Pro out there, Mike Ferguson, right? And he ended up finishing with his band.
He did.
Yeah, which is always good to see. I love seeing some of the other pros come out and experience Conquer the Gauntlet, because I feel like there's this, unless you come and experience the race, you don't really understand how difficult it is, or what type of obstacles there are, because you can look at the pictures, but it's just not the same. So
yeah,
right. Yeah.
He seemed very inspired by Conquer the Gauntlet.
Yeah, I know afterwards he said that his whole purpose was just to keep the band, and he did. And he definitely, to know Mike, Mike is probably one of the nicest guys out there, and he definitely picked a rainy day to try a Conquer the Gauntlet. Yeah. And it wasn't even like the good rain. It was like that misty, everything's just damp enough to be not wet, but that slick damp. Yeah. So I think that's what it was, because rain, everything's just wet and muddy and gross, but this was that damp, dewy kind of rain.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like not all bands are created equal, and you definitely earned it if you were out there at Iowa, from what the stories I've been hearing.
Absolutely.
So same day as Iowa, you guys had a pretty crazy day. So you finished up racing Conquer the Gauntlet and then drove a couple hours to Minneapolis for Toughest Mudder, the 12-hour overnight OCR, multi-lap OCR. So I know obviously you've been to tons of regular OCRs, but this was your first true ultra OCR experience, overnight race. Kind of give me some of your initial impressions.
I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was extremely well run. I thought the camaraderie, like the difference between a traditional elite wave of OCR where there is no helping each other, there is no, it's every man to themselves. Although if you're in an OCR, you know that doesn't always exist. Like a lot of time there's a lot of cheering and pep talking between the racers. But to watch a race where you are helping each other and you do need help, it would be surprising. I'm sure, Evan, you probably did, but to do the entire night and not receive assistance anywhere.
I still get help at Everest usually. Although this time they had the ropes down, so you could actually run and pull yourself up. But I mean, if there was a hand there when I was grabbing the rope, I grabbed it. Right, there's no need to waste extra energy. But other than that, I pretty much do everything else by myself. I know for Block Ness Monster, sometimes depending on how many people are in the water, sometimes I'm using that advantage, and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I just pull myself over. So
I carefully observed your technique on Block Ness Monster.
So there were certain obstacles we got to see over and over and over again.
Right.
We saw a lot of them.
So I'll let people know my secret. One, there are imperfections in the obstacle. So there's like a metal lip, and if you feel along, there's a couple of spots where it actually juts out slightly. So I put one hand on that, and I jump, and then frog kick, and I reach with the other hand, grab the top of the obstacle, and then essentially do a pull-up and rotate over. If there's people behind me, I'll, reach back and help the block rotate. If there's no one behind me, I just keep on cruising by myself. So it's my secret. I'm letting all my good secrets out here.
It's out there now.
Everyone knows. Yeah. So I think it was really cool just to see the camaraderie and to witness 12 hours. And that 12 hours, even just being on crew, that 12 hours went so fast. And it's overnight, and I don't do stay up late overnight. So for me to be like, it was like, I honestly thought that was the fastest 12 hours ever.
Yeah, it was fast.
Yeah.
If you're running,
I don't know how many miles we ran, but I felt like we ran like the last mile multiple times.
If you're running it, I'd say the beginning of the race usually goes by pretty fast, and then as your laps slow slightly, usually the end of the race, you're like, why am I still here? Why won't I? But luckily with the 8 and 12 hour, for me personally, I can keep a relatively consistent pace. So it actually goes by pretty quick for me. The 24 hour, when you start hitting those like second half of the race and those laps start taking, significantly longer, then it feels slower because you're like, what? I've only moved 5 miles in the last 2 hours or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And it was really neat. And I said, I think that it's different being an elite racer trying to figure out strategy. Poor Corinne, we just met her that day. And so we talked to her a little bit about what she expected from the race. Andy had already given me a heads up that Corinne could win. She said she's going to come in and say that she's not a good runner. She's not really good at these. She's like, but Andy had said to me, you need to know that she could win this. And
so I feel like that's a stereo. I'm going to make a generalization. Yeah. That's like a stereotypical female response. Like even the girls on our team are always like, oh, well, this is not my race, or, oh, look at all the other people here. I'm just here for fun. It's like, and then they go and they crush it and they win. It's like, meanwhile, the guys are at the opposite end of the spectrum. They're like, oh, I'm definitely going to win today. And then they they get blown out of the water, right? You're like 50th place. You're like, oh, what happened to winning? That's weird.
Right. It's true. But it was close. She was like second place was on her butt all night. So I felt horrible because here this poor girl is just meeting Doug and I was like, you're doing a rolling stop. You're not stopping. We're going to run alongside of you down the road. And we're throwing chocolate milk at you. And like, what do you want here? Eat some peaches, eat them faster. Because I think at one point towards the end, I mean, there was a 2-minute gap between them, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I think we were on like 3 or probably 5 hours left of the race and 2-minute gap. So, and the difference is that hard cutoff. So when your last lap is, like, we knew when her last lap was going to be, because she wouldn't be able to get another one in, but she had to win that lap. And you don't always know where second place, or for you, like where first place is, how far, have you made up ground on that lap? Have you lost ground? So it was like to crew your first race like that. And then having Andy, who had major goals, and she actually just had bicep surgery as well. So knowing this was her last race of the season, like it was different I think we got spoiled. I think the next person we crew is in a world of hurt because they're not going to stop. Like, it's going to be like, no, you can't sit. Why are you sitting? Get up.
They're going to PR for sure.
So, yeah, because I think at one point Andy's like, okay, like where am I at? How much time do I have? I said, you're at, whatever, hour 2 right now, but you have to leave this minute. So let's go. Like, you're out. The pit is now closed. The table is you're gone.
The pit is closed.
So, yeah, get out.
Yep, get out. You've been here long enough. So yeah, it was things like that, and we were just laughing. But it was so much fun. Like, I thought that was, like, it was just so much fun. Maybe not for you guys running, but for us, it was a blast.
So I had my dad and my cousin actually pitting for me, and we've gotten this down to a pretty good science where I eat the same things every lap. There's no deviation. I don't ask for special things. Like, they know what I'm going to ask for when I come into the pit. Now, as someone who is pitting for, someone you don't know or just met per se, what were some things, if someone else is listening and they're going to pit crew for someone that you say maybe were a surprise to you, or some kind of key takeaways you have for other people who are going to pit crew for other people?
I think the benefit that we had, and Doug, you could speak to this as well for you, is we were capable of running out to, and it normally was Blockness, which you had, what did we figure out? It was like 5 minutes from Blockness to when they actually hit the pit, Doug, if that.
It was right about 5 minutes.
So we were able to run out to Blockness and basically say, what are you going to want? Because it was like, there was a whole bunch of things. And then they would run out of stuff. I'm like, well, you can't have that. Sorry. And then we would start rationing what they could have of things that they were repetitive. Like, we learned really fast, like, what repetitively they were asking for. Andy was like always an orange. Green was peaches and chocolate milk. So Andy was normally like an orange, and she had ginger ale mixed with water, ginger ale straight, or just water. So it was pretty consistent, Doug. I don't know. You can probably speak to that a little bit too. Or did you disappear?
A 4 or 5 foot wide table, and half of it was for Corinne and half of it was for Andy. So we kept their stuff separate. They were very organized by having the notebook with their projected paces per lap, basically. And so we were just trying to keep on track. But for someone that's new to pitting, I would say to sit and talk with your runner and, get some of that information down on paper, like what's your goals here, and that way you can help keep them on track when they're frazzled and not thinking straight.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Now, I know we were joking about, how you kept on pushing people to keep moving, and actually, even whether you're trying to win or hit a PR or just survive the night, I think that's actually the best technique, is to keep moving. Because I know even on warm races, when I stop moving, I get cold, right? Like, during the gauntlet, the 48-hour one, it was like, 75 degrees at night, and I was like a borderline heat casualty earlier that day, and I would stop moving and 5-10 minutes later, I'd be shivering, right? I'd be like, I needed to wrap myself in my dry robe to stay warm. So,
wow.
And it only gets worse when like a World's Toughest Mudder last year, it was like 32 degrees. So it only gets worse when it gets colder. So, keeping moving, keeping that, keep generating your own internal body heat is the way to go. And it's the reason I run shirtless at almost every toughest mudder. I put on a Neptune top during toughest mudder Philly. And out of all the ones in America I've done, I've never put on neoprene for the 8-hour or 12-hour ones. I did put on neoprene in UK because it was raining the whole time, so I couldn't. Like, I was never dry, so I started getting cold in the middle of the night. So I put on a frog skin top. But
yeah, that makes sense. Well, and it was like people can go to. I think I was on the CTG Pro Team Facebook page live and watch your pit. And when I say rolling pit, I think your pit lasted approximately 10 seconds.
Yeah, we were getting good. At it.
Yeah.
And it was every lap. So, but it was cool because it was fun to see so many people out on course and be able to cheer for everybody. And I think my biggest concern was that at some point, like, Andy or Crean was going to come through and we weren't going to see them. Because again, it's somebody like Andy I would recognize in the dark, but I was a little concerned I wouldn't recognize because we just met her that day. So it was like, she could run past us and we wouldn't know. But that never happened, so it was good.
Yeah. Me and my dad and my cousin have essentially a far recognition signal that I'm not going to tell you because I don't want other people using it, and then it's going to confuse them because they're going to see other people doing it. But I noticed that. Oh, you got it?
Yeah. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So, and then it also helps, having something noticeable at your tent, right? So I have the giant Hammer Nutrition banner, which helps. Right. Although at night, it suddenly becomes a little bit harder to see. So a lot of times, at some races, I'll purposely set up near like one of the big lights or maybe something that's unique on the ground, like if there's some like giant fence post or, like, all right, I know I'm right after the turn or something like that. So something that's very easily noticeable and you're not relying on, your vision in the darkness there.
Right. Well, and having that front row would have been crucial too. I think that if you would have to like go all the way, because it was like there was a couple rows of tents, and if you have to go like all the way actually in, I think that would have been a little bit more time consuming than having that right off the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're doing a much better job as far as integrating the pit where there's a lot more people with good spots. In the past, they've done it where like there's only essentially one front row, which is garbage because then if you're not in that front row, you're at a severe disadvantage. So
right.
Yeah.
So speaking of toughest mudder, Evan, you clearly were there. So how did your race go?
So my race went really well. After I ran the last toughest, when you start collecting, so they give you a mileage patch at the end, and they have one for every 5-mile increment, which is cool. It's a nice change. And when I picked up my 55 at Toughest East, I noticed that the patches only went up to 60. There's no 65 patch. So I was like, all right, well, I need to get 60 at the next one so I can like max out their patches. It would be cool.
They're gonna have to go make new patches now, thanks to you.
I guess it'd be cooler to break their system and get more than they have produced. But my goal was to get 60. So that was kind of my whole focus the entire time. And the race started off with a good pace. Everyone, like for the first time at a toughest mudder ever, people went out like at an actual reasonable pace. And I'm usually a lot further back at the end of the first lap. And I found myself in like the top 10 at the end of the first lap, which I was like, well, that's a nice surprise. People are being reasonable for once. I did see Matt Hansen stop on the first lap to save a baby turtle in the middle of his lap. So he like stopped running, picked up a turtle in the middle of the trail, moved it off to the side, and then kept running, which I thought was funny. And then, it's just a matter of settling into your pace after all the obstacles opened and just kind of cruising along. And I moved up at the top 3 pretty quickly, I think by lap 2 or 3. And then just started chipping away, and eventually Matt Hansen passed me. And then the guy who was in first, Alec Blennis, who's a name I haven't heard in a couple of years. He used to do OCR a lot more in like 2015. Was in first for a while and ended up dropping out after I think 30 or 35 miles, something like that.
35, I think. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he quit after 35.
And then, so it was just me and Matt and chasing him down all night. And I was hoping he'd blow up because at one of the races, it was like a year or two ago, one of the toughest mudders, I ended up passing him on the last lap because he had blown up. And so after the race, I was talking to him. I was like, yeah, I kept hoping you'd blow up because I had my pace at that point and I didn't really have any more to give. That's kind of just what I was operating on. And he's like, I did blow up. And I was like, what? But his blow up it's a very mild blow up. Like he went from doing like sub hour laps to like an hour, 7 or an hour and 8 or something like that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't enough.
Lap. Well, it was his last like 2 laps. Started slowing.
Yeah. So it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me to catch him. And I was kind of focused on 60. So I did hit 60. And I think he ended up beating me by 19 minutes ish. But when he crossed the line, he collapsed and he had to go to the medical tent. So I count that as a small victory. Because,
it's a pretty big victory.
Because Matt's a really good athlete, right? I mean, top 5 world's toughest mudder in the past. He's been in top 5 several toughest mudders. So, really stellar athlete. So I was just happy that I could make him work for it, to be honest with you. So that was pretty cool. Right. And he ended up getting 60. I got 60. And the other cool part was, while the two of us were battling out, 3rd and 4th were battling out. And John Donnelly. So I'm gonna butcher Akash's name. Akash Garg, I believe. I'm sorry, I'm butchering your name probably. So the guy who finished 3rd, Akash, right, ends up finishing his 50th mile, and I guess doesn't have time to go back out for 55, or doesn't think he has time, so he stops. And the guy in 4th, John Donnelly, is like, I think I can finish one more and essentially move into 3rd. So he goes back out, and the whole crowd is kind of waiting and sitting there. Oh, gonna make it. And he comes in and has electroshock therapy and the Mudderhorn, the big A-frame cargo net. And there's literally like 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. And he makes it probably, 2/3 of the way up Mudderhorn, and time just runs out. And it was like, but
like if he had a bracelet to pass that, he would have made it.
Yeah. So I was talking to him on Instagram. He was like, he didn't think he was going to go back out for that last lap. So he'd used all of his bracelets essentially. Or,
right.
Yeah, I guess you get one more, but I don't know what he used it on, but yeah. So.
Yeah, well, and we were standing there. I think, Doug, were you with me? And I could hear them say, if you can get one more lap in, 3rd is not going out for a last lap. You need to get one more lap in. And like at that point, I think mentally he wasn't prepared to do that last lap. So I think he just didn't say anything to his crew. He just kind of went back out. I was like, ooh, that probably is not the best feeling ever. When you're like mentally, I'm done.
Right.
And then you find out, crap, I could take 3rd if I get this lap in. And I said, had he had a band to bypass it, or even, 2 minutes, that's all it would have been. 2 minutes and he would have gotten another lap. Yeah. But it was pretty cool that they basically stopped everybody. They wouldn't do awards or anything until he crossed the finish line, because that whole lap didn't count, so you just ran 5 miles for fun.
Yeah. 5 miles after running 45, which is less fun.
Yeah.
So and that mental edge makes a huge difference, right? I mean, I ran essentially nonstop for 60 miles. And when I crossed the finish line, my mind tells my body that it's over, and I have trouble walking to the bathroom, right? Like, because mentally I'm out of it at that point. My body's like, everything hurts. Please stop. Do whatever you're doing.
Right.
The first 45 minutes after one of these ultras is the worst. Is absolutely the worst, because like my knees, ankles, and hips, and my whole lower body hurts, and there's really nothing you can do about it. You just kind of ride the pain wave, and it goes away after about 45 minutes to an hour every time. But yeah, it's very uncomfortable. Do not like it. Yeah. So like I even if sitting down hurts and like laying down hurts, and kind of makes me fidget. But I don't know. I've done enough of these events where I know it's coming and I know it'll stop in an hour. I just gotta just gotta kind of try to take my mind off things and try to find something else to do for that hour. So
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
yeah,
Doug
so,
and I were exhausted just from, like CTG Iowa, driving up, doing that, and then coming back to Wisconsin right afterwards. And we were pretty dead. I can't imagine running it and being functional.
yeah. And then the other worst part is it throws off my sleep schedule for the week because now I'm like, I was awake all night and I was like, at the end I was like chugging caffeine and my body hurts, right? So like laying down is not very comfortable either, and sleeping's not very comfortable. So
Right.
it's
Yeah. I don't know that we got sleep for that entire weekend because Doug had to. What time was your flight the next morning out of O'Hare? It was pretty early. Do you remember? Are you there? I think I lost him.
We lost Doug.
We lost Doug. Yeah, but I think his flight was at like 8 a.m. out of O'Hare, and I live 2.5 hours from O'Hare. So the alarm was going, like he had never met my mom, so we had to drive back, go to dinner because my mom was in town, and then get up at like 4:30, I think. So
That was a very early morning.
yeah, oh there you are. Yeah, it was like no sleep for an entire weekend.
Yeah, I had to pretend I was in a good mood.
Did. So
All right, so let's keep it moving. Doug, you also this past weekend you did Hero Dash. So tell us a little bit about that. And how it went.
Okay. So there's an organization in Mississippi called the Mississippi Adopt a Hero Foundation, which obviously supports first responders, and they decided to do an OCR to raise money for their cause. And they called in Battle OCR to do the coursework and design obstacles and lay out the course. Battle OCR is out of southern Louisiana, and they've put obstacles in the North American Championship before, and they have an obstacle that will be in a couple weeks called Valkyrie, which is a rig that goes up about 10 or 12 feet high with Olympic rings that angle at a 45-degree angle up and then a 45-degree angle down. So that was really neat to run into like a very professional course for a relatively small town event. And it brought in some regionally known people to run it. It was about 4 miles long and probably about 25 obstacles. It had a unique feature. It had a kayak portion. It was probably about a half-mile kayak paddle.
In the OCR? Like as part of the
Yes. Yes.
How do they move that? How do they move? How do they have enough kayaks? I don't understand.
Well, okay, so it's a state park on the Bogue Chitto River, and there's like an outfitter that rents kayaks for the public. And so they had tons and tons of kayaks, and they just had them lined up down the bank, and they said there's a turnaround spot up the river, start paddling. And there was enough for everyone, and they had a long enough time break between heats. I think they kind of calculated that. So I didn't see or hear that anyone didn't get a kayak.
My question is to you: how is your kayaking skills in that race? Did you get passed by anybody?
Okay, so
did a small child beat you? Is that what's going on?
It's actually worse. So what happened was, okay, the race director, Sid Morris, at the start line, he said, there is a kayak portion. I don't care how you get your kayak up the river, just do it. And everybody just kind of looked at each other like, okay. So me and David Carraway were neck and neck for first place, just paddling our butts off. And we're in a shallow rapids part, and this guy comes running past us, dragging his kayak behind him. and and the guy's just saying over and over, Sid said it's okay. Sid said it's okay.
They're in kayaks paddling, and a guy runs past them.
And that guy moved up like 5 positions. Like he was way back, and he became the leader for the rest of that kayak because he hit the deep water, got back in his kayak, and just kept on trucking.
All right.
Yeah, that was an interesting twist. That section of water was a complete shift in all the places. Like, you know, everybody that seemed like they were settled in for their places for a lot of the race, it all changed right there.
Just imagine Doug, and if you know David, Doug and David are good friends, and like I just imagine them like battling, and then this guy just running past them.
That's exactly what happened.
So yeah.
Yeah, but you know, I turned around going downstream. You know, it was a pretty good flow of water, and we've had a lot of rain down here. Going downstream, I happened to look at my watch with the GPS running, and I was paddling like a 12 or 13 minute mile pace with the kayak, and I thought, I'm really moving. but you know, so was everyone else. We were all putting in the same effort, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was only like the third obstacle into the race, and like that's a different type of cardio. Like you're using all your upper body for cardio, which is not common in racing. so it was a different feeling. Like my legs had kind of relaxed, but then they were tense from pushing at the foot rests in the kayak, and it took me probably another quarter mile to kind of go back into a normal running feel to it. So I mean, that was a really cool twist to the race, definitely.
And that's what I love about some of these smaller local races. There's like they're completely outside the box, right? You know, it's just like the tire slack line, and then you have this kayak portion
right
with apparently runnable, and yeah,
part of it. Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
I did a 12-hour adventure race once, and the kayak portion, it was on a lake. It was the worst part of the race. Like, yeah, of course we didn't train kayak. We just winged it because that's what we do. We're like, oh, I'll just man up, right? I'll just power through it. You know, and like an hour and a half into kayaking across a lake, I'm like, oh, my lower back's killing me. This is terrible. Right. Why didn't we practice?
Right.
Yeah. So how was the rest of the Hero Dash?
Well, it was a lot of fun. So there were 3 or 4 of us that were kind of bouncing around for the lead positions from that point on, and I was right behind. I think his name was Benjamin Capello, and he's a pretty fast OCR runner, pretty well known in southern Louisiana, and we get to the last section of obstacles, which is like a crazy balance section, which is basically 2 slack lines that go up to an overhead slack line that you have to go hand over hand across, and then back down, and then there's immediately another obstacle. So when we get to that, you know, we're both going fast, and like we're slipping, you know, didn't slow down and take a couple deep breaths before doing balance. And when we get to the one they called Valkyrie, that changed everything, because so many people got stuck there because it took a tremendous pull up to reach the next ring. You know, basically you pulled up and then had to lock off long enough to reach up and grab the next ring, and there was like 6 or 7 rings going up at this 45-degree angle. And then to make it even more diabolical, there's a force 5 D ring hold in the middle to transition on before you come down the rings on the other side. And at that moment, your feet are probably 8 feet off the ground. So just the height element was a big mental challenge. Even if people had decent grip strength, they were just kind of thinking, what if? So the lead changed big there. The final obstacle was about a 20-foot tall caving ladder on a scaffold structure that crossed over a platform at the top and then came down a rope. So, legs were cramping on that thing because those, it's a free swinging ladder, and you try to get your feet on it and keep your balance and everything, and your muscles tense up weird after running on those. But I was able to pull ahead through that section and landed first place.
Awesome. And that's first place overall, not
Yes.
masters. Yeah.
Yes. And it was
masters,
interesting.
technically, I guess.
Right. And all three podium guys, first, second, third place, were all over 40. I thought that was a very interesting twist, but that showed we had some powerhouses out there.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And the top female was the only female to keep her band through the race. No other females were able to complete that Valkyrie.
So some good tips for those who headed to North American OCR Championships or OCR World Championships there, because that obstacle will definitely be at NORAM. I'm not sure if it'll be at OCRWC, but
right.
Yeah, it's good things to take note of there. Now, I went a week after Toughest Mudder. Like once a year, I occasionally do this where I run an Ultra OCR and then try to do a regular shorter race like a week later, which is not a good idea, and I don't recommend it. But I like to try to defy what I think is the limits, right? And be like, well, I did it. I did something huge, and now I can do something short and still do well. And it usually doesn't go super well, or I don't perform to my potential. But I went back to Long Island because that's where my family's from. So I was going to run Tougher Mudder Long Island, so basically an 8-mile race a week after my 60-mile of Toughest Mudder. And when I showed up at Tough Mudder Long Island, or Tougher Mudder Long Island, landed on Friday. I get off the plane, and basically I got a bunch of text messages that say the race has been canceled. So it was run at a Bethpage Century Park that's owned by Nassau County. Tough Mudder didn't explicitly say this, but I think if you watch the video of the CEO, Kyle, I think you can read between the lines, and I'm pretty sure Nassau County canceled the race, not Tough Mudder, right? Because why would Tough Mudder cancel one of their own races if they don't absolutely have to? The CEO is like, yeah, we added water stations, we added mist stations, but after talking to our stakeholders, which what does that even mean? Like, who's a stakeholder? I guess the people that own the property. They said we decided to cancel it for the safety and health of everyone, which I thought was a BS call, frankly. It was at the start time of Tougher Mudder, it was 83 degrees, and it was going to reach a high of 93 according to the weather forecast on Friday.
Oh yeah. And
the humidity was high, right? So the heat index is going to feel hotter. But I just thought it was it was just like shameful society. Like, all right, someone take personal accountability for your own performance, right? Like, right. If you're overweight and you've been day drinking, and then you're going to try to run 8 miles and you haven't trained at all, yeah, it's probably not going to go super well.
Right.
But no, I don't know. I'm always of the opinion of take accountability and responsibility for your own actions. And
I wouldn't even want to know, Doug, how hot was it when you raced? Because it's been ridiculously hot down there.
Oh yeah, I mean the heat index almost every day is over 100 here. Yeah. With 98% humidity most of the time. I mean, I regularly train at around a 105 heat index because I run at lunchtime a lot of times at work. So yeah, I mean, it's just what you're accustomed to, I guess.
Yeah, and there was a rugged maniac going on in Tri-State, so Raceway Park, New Jersey, so northern New Jersey. There was Fit Challenge going on in Connecticut. Oh, Bone Fry was in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that.
All these other races are literally a couple hours away, and, Nassau County ended up canceling the race, which is
right.
Which is, again, if it's so dangerous to be outside, then why weren't the beaches closed, right? Like, why aren't the police driving around telling people to get back inside their house?
Right. State of emergency.
It's just so ridiculous. Yeah, state of emergency, right? So I was more upset because I left my wife for the weekend, who has
Yeah.
a month-old.
Oh,
So my
yeah.
wife was like, you left for essentially for nothing. And I was like, yeah. So, but yeah, to hang out with my family and see some friends. I still hang out with some of the Tough Mudder community people. So
Oh, that's
it
good.
wasn't a complete
Well,
waste.
and you went to a ninja gym, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to Obstacle Athletics, the ninja gym owned by Kevin Mudman LaPlatney out in Deer Park, Long Island. So it was a good time. Practiced my spear throw. No big deal. Did you see my video?
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I hit 4 out of 5 in the video. The video I took before that, I hit 1 out of 5. So I didn't upload that one.
Well, at least like when the camera's on, you have to perform. So that's good.
Yeah.
I would be 0 out of 5. So
it was from 30 feet. So that was, I think it's normally starting races is 20 to 30 feet. Is what what the Google told me. So
yep,
I went with the further one. But
good. Train up. I would go from 10 feet and still miss, but it's all right.
So the other kind of interesting thing was last week through a connection at KCOCR, I went to Advanced Healthcare and Sports Injury Center. So it's a chiropractic center, and they also do some other things like active release therapy and dry needling and adjustments, and I think they have some other recovery modalities there. But went there a couple days after Toughest Mudder, so still, covered in rash and, all my muscles were still tight, and it was pretty cool. I met with Dr. Kirk Iotis, so sports chiropractor essentially, and he went through and did like essentially a assessment of me. Basically asked where my problems were, which is I don't have any major problems, but like my calves are usually tight, and I occasionally get some tendonitis in my left knee. So I told him that. He did a assessment of me, and then put me through a couple of the modalities. So did some adjustments, essentially cracked my ankles, and based off what he saw and what I was complaining about, he was like, "Oh, I think it's essentially tightness in your ankles that's causing like problems up your lower leg chain." So that was cool to kind of get like that assessment. And then he did, like I said, adjusted the ankles, adjusted the back, and did some active release therapy on the calves. So essentially it's a combination of like stretching / massage. So kind of helps loosen it up. And then did some, the other one was instrument assisted IASTM, which I can't remember what the other letters stand for. But basically they take a metal tool and they scrape your muscles to kind of loosen the fascia on your muscles. So he did that.
Yeah, I had that done on my arm.
Yeah, what'd you think of it?
It doesn't hurt, but it's not comfortable.
Yeah,
if
agreed.
That makes sense. Like it's just it's not painful, but it's like that feels a little bit odd. Like you're crossing the line of that might hurt, but it doesn't. It's just I don't know. So I tell everybody it doesn't hurt. It's just uncomfortable. It's not. So
they also do dry needling there. Have you had dry needling done?
I haven't, but I've heard about it, and I've heard that it's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty good. We've talked about it on the podcast before, but essentially they take a needle. It's like acupuncture, but they put one needle in and they kind of stick it into your muscle until it touches like a nerve, and then your muscle flinches and kind of relaxes a little bit. And it's supposed to take away a lot of the pain that if you're having due to injuries. So I've had that done on my pec, and there was no need to do it on this particular session, so I did not have it done. But some of the other modalities were pretty cool. Dr. Iotis was very knowledgeable. It was super cool. So we're going to bring him on the podcast probably in the next month or two and have him run through kind of everything that they provide. And I know, like, if you're not from Kansas City, it's like, oh, well, what good does that do me? Well, you can find a similar, sports chiropractic type office in your area and get a lot of the same treatments done. So I think it'll be really educational. I know I learned a lot just going to his office for one visit. So I'm definitely plan on going back in the future, right before, right after kind of some major races I have coming up. All right, we're going to start wrapping it up. Got 3 people on the podcast, so it means it's time for Tell Us One Thing About Yourselves. You'll be surprised to know. And we got Doug or Lisa up first. Who's going first?
Oh, please let me go first.
Doug. Doug volunteered. I love it. Let's go.
Yes. Go.
I'm guessing it was sarcasm, but I'm gonna ignore it.
Yeah. No, I knew what I was stepping into.
Yeah.
Well, I there's a couple foods I really hate, and people might be surprised to know one is English peas. I can't stand the texture, the smell, even the sight of them.
What's English peas? Is that different from regular peas?
It's a regular pea. It's just a regular pea.
English peas.
Well,
Weird.
No, it's not. It's not chickpeas. It's not snap peas. It's just the round green balls.
He'll eat everything else, but he will not eat a pea, like a regular pea. No. And you can't even cook them in the house. Like,
No, they're banned.
Of a pea.
Lisa has not figured out a way to sneak those in any type of diet.
I've gotten everything else snuck in except for peas.
She snuck cottage cheese in on me, and I really have banned cottage cheese too, but somehow she got away with that.
But peas are a no.
All right, Lisa, what do you got?
So I know that we did a podcast and we talked about my diving experience, but I don't think we ever hit on the fact that I played a mermaid. So I've been a mermaid multiple times. So
as you run out of oxygen, are you allowed to make bubbles, or is it like a no bubble policy?
There's a no bubble policy. No, we had.
I can't tell if you're serious or not. Are you serious?
No, there's not a no bubble policy. There's still floating mermaids at the bottom of the pool. Just kidding. I did it for 2 different tanks. So because they realized really fast that I had learned how to be a mermaid, so they kept using that. So whenever the mermaid in our shows needed a day off, I got to take her place. So one show was a concrete pool, which was the best because you didn't have to do anything but hold on to a weight at the bottom of the pool, and you could use a regulator because no one could see in the water. So you just had to, they put a speaker underneath so you could hear your cues, and you could pop up above the water, and then you would go back under again. But the other pool was a plexiglass tank. And so they give you, it's like a straw. It's a clear wand. And those are actually really hard to use. So I actually had to train to learn how to use one of those. But so it's like a straw that you just put in your mouth and you can swim with it, and it's clear. So the audience couldn't see it, but yeah, so that's how we breathe underwater.
And then where's the straw? Where's it? It's just sticking above the water. I'm confused what's going on.
No, it goes into an oxygen tank.
Okay.
So everything's linked into an oxygen tank. So yeah, we were hooked into oxygen. So, but there were times that we would forget to check the levels of the oxygen before show.
Good.
So there was a couple times that I ran out of oxygen underwater. So, and you would just be breathing on a straw and nothing was coming, and you would ruin the show because you're like, and the mermaid now is going to be she's not.
We've lost another mermaid.
Yep, let the mermaid out. So, yeah, but it was fun. It was a definite unique experience. Not one that I ever need to fully experience multiple times again soon. So. But.
All right, so I'll bounce off a little bit of Doug's story. So when you're in Army training, they give you meals ready to eat, which are essentially bagged meals that last pretty much forever. Not forever, but they last like 10 years. And terrible for you. They're like super high in trans fat, and high in saturated fat. But it's meant to help you survive in combat in extreme situations. So from that, I've eaten a bunch of things. One of them, which is what, when you said peas, reminded me of the roast beef MRE and the chicken pesto pasta, where if the first time I had that food was in the MRE, I now don't like it as a real food because it reminds me of the MRE. So like if I had the food beforehand and then I had the MRE, I'd be like, oh, this tastes good. But if I had the MRE first, I refuse to eat roast beef. I refuse to eat chicken pesto pasta. Like it tastes like that. To me, I can like taste the preservatives, even though there's none in it if you make it fresh.
Right.
But it's kind of linked to that. So yeah.
That's. Yeah.
And then that one's not too exciting, so I'll follow up with another one that's actually from my new book, Ultra-OCR Man. So when I was deployed in 2008, my boss calls me. I'm on quick reaction force, so we have to respond to any incidents. And he's like, hey, we need to go over to the Iraqi Army compound, which is like 2 miles down the road. They have King Faisal's car. And I was like, what? Like King Faisal, the original ruler of Iraq. If you've seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia, he's the main Arab character in it that's working with Lawrence. So we go over to the Iraqi Army compound, and they say, yeah, we recovered King Faisal's car from Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and here it is. And sitting in the middle of Iraq in 2008 is a 1930s Rolls-Royce Phantom in like
wow.
mint condition, right? Like, I don't know how much that car is worth, but I mean, it had to be worth, like the car by itself had to be worth millions, like $1 million or so. And then the value, because it's linked to a historical figure, had to, double the value of the car or something. So
that's insane.
I got a picture of myself in front of this Rolls-Royce Phantom, and we looked at it, and I have no idea what happened to the car after that. I never saw it again. The Iraqi Army took it. I have no idea what they did with it. If they, I literally have no idea. It could be in a museum. Could be in someone's garage.
Right.
Yeah,
somebody could be driving around, cruising town in it.
But it was just crazy, like it's in 2008, right? So the invasion was 5 years ago, and this car is, who the hell knows where this car was, and there it is, 2008, mint condition, Rolls-Royce Phantom. So yeah, you can read that story in a little more detail in my book, and a bunch of other kind of interesting, cool war stories from Iraq. So that's now available on the website, teamstrengthspeed.com. Ultra OCR Man, all the profits go to the charity Folds of Honor. If you liked a lot of these smaller race series, my other book, Mud Run Guides, Ultimate OCR Bucket List, is on the website also. It's also now on digital, which you can find on Amazon. And then the other big news is we just got a restocking of Bleg mitts. So the 3mm ones and the 1mm ones are in stock, small, medium, and large, all sizes. And then on top of that, there's actually a special going on right now where you can get the extremes, the 3mm ones, and the lights, the 1mm ones, and save $10 off the total price. So pick those up. The lights, there's been some confusion. The lights are not the old versions, right? So if you bought yours in 2018 or earlier, they don't sell those anymore. Those are not sold. Those are old model, not super good. Those are actually 2mm ones. The lights and the extremes are both new in 2019. And one's 1mm, one's 3mm, much better. Top opening flap as opposed to the vertical flap that the older versions have. So check those out. We will probably run out by the time World's Toughest Mudder gets here. So make sure you order them sooner rather than later if you want them for World's Toughest. And other than that, we just updated the CTG Pro Team website. So go over and check that out. It's got a bunch of Stoke Sheds videos like we talked about at the beginning of this podcast. And just put some other pretty cool stuff up there. So explore around. I also included a recovery center section that lists a couple places in the U.S. you can go get chiropractic treatment or dry needling or active release therapy or cryotherapy, stuff like that some of the pro team uses. Yeah. Anything else, Doug?
I think that's everything.
Lisa?
We're all good.
All right. That's it. I'm going to go take care of my crying baby.
Oh, no.
I've had enough. No, he's actually not crying right now. He was a little fussy earlier, though. But I need to check on him. So
yeah. There are many reasons why I don't have children, and that's probably one of the main ones.
All right. We'll catch you guys later.
All right. Bye.